Something I thought we'd kick off with is just some of the. I know what it's like to be at the back. I know what it's like to be at the middle, and occasionally they let me have a wee shot at the front. I want to start with just some of the ways I look at sailing. I think it's actually there's pros and cons of just about everything you do. You could pull things really tight, and what does that make you do, Peter? It makes you point high, doesn't it? And you can let things off. What does that make you do? Makes you go faster, doesn't it? So let's start with that and see where we get to going upwind. So when you're going upwind, obviously, one of the most important things is to have your sails pulled in tight. We all know that, don't we? So what sort of settings do you go for, Andy? Do you have a settings there, or do you have?
Pretty much. My jibbed cars, for example, are quite important to get the shape of the jib set. So I've always got 3 holes showing in front of the jib cars, and that's kind of my base setting. And I'm happy at that, and I know that I can control the jib either with a little bit more tension or a little bit less tension on the sheet. And typically I'm looking, I think it's about from my watch to the end of my hand, that distance roughly from the pulley to the jib, the corner of the jib. That's roughly about the right sort of length
Is that
I'm looking for.
International measurement?
Absolutely, that's a national measurement. Yeah. I'll market that. That's roughly what I'm looking for, to understand that my jib's probably set in the ballpark figure of where I want it to be. I'll come up. So I guess for me that's it's about getting a base setting from that perspective. So if I get to my base setting, then psychologically I'm happy, and then I can work around that base setting. Do I want to point a bit higher, or do I want to go a bit faster? And I guess that's what Neil's talking about. So do you pull the sail in, or do you let the sail out? But what's really important after attack, for example, is that you get your boat speed back up, and you're aiming for your target boat speed. So I guess my target boat speed I'm always aiming for is 4.5 knots. Doesn't matter what the wind is, I want to try and get 4.5 knots. Now in the lighter stuff you're probably not going to be able to get that, so you need to accept that in the lighter winds that's probably going to be a reduced number, but around about 4.5 knots is what I'm aiming for all the time. If I get to 5 knots going upwind, I'm probably reaching too much. If I get to 5.5, I'm definitely reaching too much. So you can use that as like a guide as to, am I pointing well or am I going too fast? But it all comes down slightly differently to, I guess, something that Rachel mentioned in her opening speech there, is that it makes a difference from a crew weight perspective as well. Dara's not here, so we can talk about him. He's a lot heavier than my crew, and he's a lot heavier than Neil's crew as well. So we find that in the stronger wind, Dara can keep going higher and faster than Neil and myself. So we have to change our styles, and I guess that's something that we were talking about on Friday night. It was just about how we change our styles to work around the race course when we're going upwind. So I'm conscious I've just sat down and started.
No, it's fine. No, it's good. It's good.
Because one of the things you were saying as well was that some people are such accurate helms upwind that they can point really high and they can have their sails in really tight. And for some people, it's much better to go a bit quicker and not let the speed drop off and not point quite as high.
Yeah.
Like Dara's helm on Seaward when he's got Titch on board, it seems like nobody can point that high, and he's got the weight on the rail as well.
Yeah, and a lot of that is down to both Titch's style, but the fact that there's a lot of weight inside of the boat, and that makes a big difference because it means you can keep the boat flat and you can have the boat powered up. Once you've got up to your target boat speed, so if you're up at 4.5 knots, there's no point in doing anything until you get to your target boat speed. But once you have hit your target boat speed, then you can start to play around with, do I want to point a bit higher, or do I want to go a little bit faster and foot off? And so I guess depending on what gusts or shifts come in, and who's around you will be what will make the team think about what do we do next. If we're coming up to an intersection with another boat where there's a port starboard happening, then you might want to duck and let somebody pass, or you might want to point up a little bit higher so that you can try and hold them so they have to duck behind you. There's a whole load of different types of tactics that you can use with your boat speed and around your base settings. And I guess if that's something that we want to explore, then then we could do that. So I guess it would be interesting just to hear what people want to talk about or want to listen to. And
When I read a book, because I read a book once, what it said was, when it's heavy, you pull the sails really tight, and then when it's loose, you let them off again. But then when it's really light, you pull them back tight again to let the wind flow over. But I actually find that really hard to sail, because when it's really tight, you've got to be so spot on. I think maybe I'm just not good enough. But so do you have to let things off a bit lighter when you're?
it's interesting because I mean you used to sail a sonata, and the sail set up in a sonata is completely different from the point of view that it's a much looser forestay that you have in a sonata, and you really have a big baggy head sail, but it's a much bigger head sail as well. So it's very much like a dinghy sail in the 707. So I guess Stuart, you can back us up with that.
Just a big dinghy.
Just a big dinghy, yeah. So we both sail RS 400s as well as 707s, and there's a lot of similarities in the boats.
True.
So it is quite an easy boat to sail from the point of view. If you can sail a dinghy, then and you understand the feel of what happens and how the boat reacts with the wind going up and down and shifting about, then you can transfer that from the dinghy into a 707 much more easily than you can in some other keel boats.
So with your weight, if you've got a heavy wind and you're beating up wind, would you have any of your crew weight in front of the shrouds ever, or is that your line, or where is the line you would have your weight?
So I guess it'd be interesting to have a straw poll on that one. I've always got one person in front of the shrouds.
One north of the shrouds, yeah.
Stuart, you?
No, I think we're all behind the shrouds, but
Right.
all crunched up.
Right.
So the helm goes up.
Can I ask
Pushes everybody up.
the flip question? So in light winds, you get to your 4.5 knots. Would you aim for a flat boat or a heeled over boat? What's your take on boat hull positions going upwind and light winds?
I would always try and get a flat boat unless it's a really light wind, in which case you're not going to be at 4.5 knots anyway, because if you're down at sort of 4 knots of breeze, or 5 knots of breeze, if you're really at the lower end of the scale, then you're not going to get your boat speed up to the same as the wind speed. So I would be looking for a more heeled boat from that point of view. But once the boat's powered up and you can get everybody on the side of the boat, then that's when I'd be looking to get to my target boat speed. So I guess that's the break point there. If you can get everybody on the rail and you're powered up, then that's when I'd be looking at my target boat speed.
Can I ask about sea state and how that affects what you do with the luff of the jib, whether you tension that harder or let it off slightly to change the shape of the jib in that respect?
Yeah. I guess it's an interesting one because I think we all do things slightly differently with our rigs as well. If I can just go to the rigs to start with, I mean, I've got kind of a base setting for my rig where the forestays at its maximum.
That's
and I think
sort of
that's everybody
the
has
707 class sort of
Yeah.
standard.
So everybody will be at maximum on the forestay, but then on the shrouds, I think Stuart and I sail drastically quite differently with our inner and our outer tensions. So I'm sitting around 25 on the outers and then about 17, 18 on the inners. And I think
I had something not dissimilar to that with a different set of shrouds, and then
Right.
my friend Angus kicked one of the shrouds. Had to put some other ones on,
right.
and they were different wires, so
Okay, is that the
tensions
difference?
have to be different because of the
Yeah,
different
okay.
calibre of wire.
Okay.
But you're still trying to achieve the same thing, same kind of bends
Yeah.
relative to I think with the new setup we had to have the lowers much tighter to
Yeah.
keep the mast straighter.
I remember some of the
Something
Nationals
strong.
a couple of years ago that yours was a lot tighter than ours.
Mm.
So I guess what we try to do from the rig, for me, my base